Hello everyone, welcome to Sleep Space. Tonight we will talk about something fascinating. Your past self is still here, and what that means for the truth about time and consciousness. I want you to settle in, get comfortable, and allow your mind to drift into a place of curiosity. As you listen, I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments. How does this idea make you feel? Do you find it comforting, unsettling, or maybe inspiring? I always enjoy reading through your perspectives because each comment reveals a unique way of seeing the same mystery, and it shows how deeply personal the question of time and consciousness really is. When we speak about a past self, we usually mean the version of us that no longer exists in the present. The child you once were, the teenager you remember, the younger adult you sometimes feel nostalgic for. In everyday conversation, we talk about these selves as though they're gone forever, like smoke fading into the air. But is that really true? When we look closely at time, physics tells a much stranger story, one where your past self hasn't disappeared at all, but is instead still preserved in the structure of the universe. This is one of those ideas that sounds poetic at first, but is grounded in hard science. To understand it, we need to look at how modern physics treats time. Before Einstein, time was seen as a universal ticking clock that kept running no matter what, the same for everyone everywhere. This is how we experience it in daily life. The second hand moves forward, we grow older, events unfold in sequence. But Einstein's theory of relativity showed that time is not separate from space. It's fused with it into a four-dimensional structure called space-time. And in this structure, all events, past, present, and future, are equally real. Think of space-time like a giant map. On a map, every city exists at once. You might be in New York, but that doesn't make Los Angeles disappear. It's still there on the map, whether or not you're standing in it. In the same way, your present moment is just one location in the map of time. The past hasn't vanished, and the future isn't waiting to be created. They're all laid out already, like points on a landscape. This leads us to what physicists call the block universe, or eternalism. In this view, time doesn't flow. Instead, all moments exist simultaneously. Imagine holding a DVD in your hand. Every frame of the movie is encoded on the disc at the same time. When you play it, you experience one frame after another, which creates the illusion of motion. But in reality, all the frames are already there. The block universe suggests that your life works the same way. The 5-year-old you is still there in space-time, just as the present-day you is here, and the future you is there as well, already existing on the universal timeline. If this is true, then your past self hasn't disappeared. That child who once marveled at the world, the teenager who dreamed big or struggled with insecurities, the adult who made choices that shaped your path. All those versions of you are still out there in their own coordinates of space-time. You just aren't experiencing them right now. This realization opens up deep questions about identity. Are you the same person as that past self? Neuroscience tells us that our brains are constantly changing. Neurons form new connections, old ones fade away, and even the structure of the brain rewires itself over time. The you of 10 years ago was a different arrangement of cells, with different memories active, different emotions dominating your mind. Yet physics says that version of you is still there, existing in its slice of space-time, as real as this version of you now. But then, what about consciousness? That's where the puzzle deepens. If all these versions of you exist, is each one still conscious in its own frame? Does your 5-year-old self still feel alive somewhere? Or is consciousness only tied to the moment we're currently experiencing? Scientists don't have a definitive answer, but there are ways to think about it. One common analogy is the flashlight beam. Imagine your consciousness as a light shining along the timeline. Wherever the beam lands, that's the moment you feel yourself existing in. Right now, your awareness is shining on this instant, the present moment. The light has already moved past your childhood, but that doesn't mean those moments are gone. They're still in the dark, just not lit up by awareness. From this perspective, your past self is still there, but no longer illuminated. Philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries. Augustine, one of the early thinkers on time, admitted that he knew what time was until someone asked him to explain it. He realized it slips through our fingers when we try to define it. The same is true today. Physics gives us models, but none of them explain why we feel like time flows, why we're locked into experiencing now instead of skipping freely between moments. Some scientists think the flow of time is simply an illusion created by memory. Your brain doesn't actually perceive time moving. It just links experiences together in order, giving you a sense of continuity. Imagine looking at photographs laid out in sequence. If you flip through them fast enough, it looks like movement, like a film. In reality, each photograph is still. That may be what your life is like, a series of still frames stitched together by memory, creating the illusion of motion. Without memory, there would be no sense of time passing. You'd only ever have the now. This suggests that your past self, while still existing in space-time, is inaccessible to you without memory. The physics may say the past is still there, but your consciousness can't reach it. This is why you feel like those selves are gone, even though they're not. They're preserved like artifacts in the museum of the universe, while your awareness keeps walking forward through the exhibits. Now consider what this means emotionally. On the one hand, it can be comforting. The happiest moments of your life are still real somewhere. That childhood birthday you loved, the first time you fell in love, the laughter with friends. They're not erased. They're forever part of the universe's structure. On the other hand, it can be unsettling. Every painful moment, every mistake, every heartbreak also still exists. You can't undo them. They're eternal in their own way. The universe is a perfect record keeper. Different philosophies interpret this differently. Buddhism, for example, teaches that the self is an illusion, always changing and never fixed. From that view, clinging to a past self is unnecessary, because that self was never permanent in the first place. Meanwhile, Western philosophy often emphasizes identity and continuity, asking whether the you of the past is truly the same person as the you of now. In physics, the question is sidestepped. Both versions simply exist, equally real, whether or not they feel connected. Another way to think about this is through physics experiments with time. Relativity shows us that time doesn't move at the same rate for everyone. Astronauts in orbit age slightly slower than people on Earth, because they experience time differently due to speed and gravity. This has been measured with precise atomic clocks. If time can stretch and bend like that, it reinforces the idea that it's not a rigid flow, but a flexible dimension. The block universe view becomes even more plausible. And then there's the future. If your past self still exists, then your future self must also exist, waiting ahead of you. Just as your childhood is still real, your old age is already part of space-time. It's simply not the slice of the timeline your awareness is shining on yet. This can feel eerie, but also strangely comforting. Your life is already written into the structure of the universe, and you are just moving through it. So when you think of your past self, don't imagine them as a ghost fading away. Picture them as alive in their own frame of space-time, frozen but real. That version of you is part of the eternal universe, a chapter still on the pages even if you've turned them. The universe doesn't delete, it only stores. That raises the personal question: how do you feel about that? Does it give you peace to know that your past selves still exist? Or does it feel heavy knowing that every moment is preserved forever? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Reading through them is always fascinating because it shows how each of us relates to these big questions differently. Some people find comfort, others find mystery, and still others find motivation in the idea that life is a fixed part of the universe. However you see it, your perspective is valuable, and sharing it adds another layer to the conversation about time and consciousness. As you let this sink in tonight, let your imagination wander across the timeline of your life. The child you once were is still there, marveling at the world. The teenager you were is still there, dreaming about the future. The person you were yesterday is still there too, just as vivid as you are now. You are a collection of selves scattered across space-time, each one as real as the present version of you. The universe is a vast archive, and every page of your story is preserved within it. What if the person you were 5, 10, or even 20 years ago isn't truly gone? We often think of our past selves as memories, faint impressions that fade as new experiences layer over them. But what if those earlier versions of you are still here, not just in the form of recollections, but in a real, physical sense, etched into the fabric of space-time? And beyond their existence, what if they continue to shape your present self in ways you don't fully realize? This idea stretches the boundaries of how we think about identity, memory, and the strange relationship between time and consciousness. Let's start with influence. Even if we take a purely scientific, everyday perspective, your past selves are constantly alive in you right now. Every decision you've ever made, every habit you've developed, every experience you've absorbed, all of them still echo within the present. Think about how your personality was molded, the way you respond to stress, the things that make you happy, the fears that hold you back. All of these are fingerprints left by earlier versions of yourself. Your present consciousness is not created in isolation. It's a layered product of countless past yous. But physics offers an even stranger lens. If space-time holds every moment as equally real, then your past selves don't just influence you indirectly. They still exist in their own right. The 5-year-old version of you is not merely a faded image, but a real structure preserved in space-time. You can't access them the way you can remember them, but their existence is as concrete as this moment. The person you were in high school is still there. The version of you that faced heartbreak for the first time is still there. They don't vanish. They remain part of the eternal landscape of the universe. Now here's the deeper question. If those versions of you still exist, are they somehow connected to you now? Could your present awareness be tethered not just to this slice of time, but also to all the slices that came before? Neuroscience hints at this possibility through the workings of memory. Memory is not a recording you play back. It's a reconstruction that your brain actively rebuilds each time you recall it. When you remember being a child, you are reactivating neural pathways that connect directly to that earlier version of yourself. In a way, your brain is reaching across time to relive the experience. Some scientists argue that memory is proof that the past isn't completely gone. The information is still encoded physically in the structure of your brain, an echo of earlier consciousness imprinted on neurons. When you recall a memory, your brain essentially lights up a fragment of the past. This means your past selves are not passive. They continue to influence your emotions, your decisions, and even the way you perceive yourself. They are not just ghosts, they are active participants in shaping the present. Take, for example, the idea of trauma. Someone who experienced pain or hardship years ago may still carry the effects in their body and mind today. That past self locked into its own slice of space-time, still radiates influence forward. The event doesn't disappear, it echoes. The same is true for joy and love. A happy childhood moment can still bring warmth decades later, because your brain and your sense of self are forever imprinted by that earlier frame of reality. This is one of the ways your past selves remain alive within you. They are carved into your biology, your memories, and the very structure of your identity. Philosophy pushes this further. There's a thought experiment often called psychological continuity. It asks, what makes you the same person across time? Your body changes, your cells die and renew, your thoughts evolve. By some measures, you're not physically the same person you were 20 years ago, yet you still feel like the same consciousness moving forward. Why? The answer may be continuity of memory and personality. Your past selves are still part of you, because they're embedded in your sense of who you are. Without them, the chain of identity breaks. But here's where things get stranger. If all your past selves are preserved in space-time, then your identity is not a single moving point. It's a collection, a constellation of selves scattered across the timeline. Right now, you feel like one unified person, but in reality, you may be more like a vast network of versions, each one existing in its own moment. You are a chorus, not a solo voice, even if you can only hear one singer at a time. This challenges the way we normally think about free will. If your past and future selves all exist, then maybe your present decisions are not as free as you imagine. They are already etched into space-time. You are experiencing them, but they are fixed like ink on a page. Some philosophers call this determinism, the idea that every action and thought was inevitable, written into the structure of the universe. Others argue that even within this block universe, consciousness itself may play a role in giving shape to how we experience those fixed events. In either case, your past selves are not gone. They're active players in the story. Another fascinating perspective comes from quantum physics. While relativity paints a picture of a fixed block universe, quantum mechanics suggests that particles, and maybe reality itself, exist in states of probability until observed. This opens the door to speculation. Could your past selves exist in multiple versions, branching off into different outcomes? Did your past contain moments where another version of you took a different path, and those selves also persist in some alternate branch of reality? If so, then not only do your past selves exist, but there may be countless versions of them scattered across possibilities. The you who made a different choice 5 years ago may still be out there, existing in a different branch of the cosmos. But even without branching realities, the simple truth remains. Your past selves have never vanished. They live on in space-time, they live on in memory, and they live on in the behaviors and thought patterns that shape who you are now. You might think of them as actors who already performed their roles on stage. The play has moved on, but the actors are still there in the earlier scenes, frozen in the record of the performance. And yet their performances echo forward, shaping how the later scenes unfold. Think about your current personality traits. Maybe you are cautious because a past self learned the hard way that risks can be painful. Or maybe you are adventurous because a past self once discovered the thrill of exploration. These influences aren't just psychological, they are the living presence of past selves working through you. They are still here, folded into every decision, every reaction, every thought. This brings us to the question of what it really means to be here. We tend to think of the present as the only reality, but physics challenges that view. If the past and future are equally real, then the present is simply the point where your consciousness happens to be anchored. It's like standing on one coordinate on a vast map. The other coordinates are still there, just not accessible to you. So when we say the past is gone, what we really mean is that it's inaccessible, not non-existent. Now imagine the psychological impact of realizing this. If your past selves are still real, does that change the way you relate to them? Instead of treating them as mistakes or faded memories, you might see them as eternal companions, locked into their own moments, forever part of who you are. The scared child, the hopeful dreamer, the confused teenager, they are still alive in their frames of space-time. You are not one self, but many selves, coexisting in the timeless fabric of the universe. This perspective can be healing. If you regret something from the past, you can remind yourself that the past you who made that choice still exists. But you, in this moment, are not them anymore. Their reality remains, but so does yours, and each version has its own place. At the same time, it can be humbling. You realize that your life is not just fleeting moments that disappear, but a lasting structure that endures in the cosmos. Every choice matters because it becomes part of the eternal record of who you are. So, returning to the question, what if the person you were 5, 10, or even 20 years ago isn't truly gone? The answer, at least from what science and philosophy suggest, is that they aren't gone at all. They are still here, in your memories, in your biology, in your habits, in the space-time fabric of the universe itself. They are still influencing your present, shaping your identity, and existing as part of the vast constellation of you. Every version of you is still alive in some sense, preserved in the eternal architecture of time. The question of whether your past selves are still here doesn't just belong to physics, it's also deeply tied to neuroscience. Because even if space-time preserves every version of you, it's your brain that creates the experience of being a continuous self moving through those moments. Without your brain's unique way of weaving time into a story, you would never have the sense of being the same person across years, decades, or even seconds. So what is your brain really doing when it constructs your awareness of time? And how does that connect to the idea that past selves still live within you? To begin, consider how strange it is that you feel time flow. From the standpoint of physics, time doesn't actually flow. Every moment simply exists, yet your subjective experience tells you that the present is always slipping away, becoming the past while the future rushes toward you. Neuroscientists call this the psychological arrow of time, and it is as much a creation of the mind as it is a feature of the universe. At the heart of this illusion is memory. Memory is the glue that binds your past selves to your present self. Without memory, there would be no sense of continuity. Imagine if every second you woke up with no recollection of what came before. You wouldn't feel like a continuous being. You would feel like a brand new person blinking into existence over and over again. In fact, there are neurological conditions where this happens. Patients with severe amnesia sometimes live only in the present moment. They don't remember what happened a few minutes ago, and they can't imagine the future. For them, the sense of flowing time breaks apart. This reveals something important. Your identity and your sense of time are inseparable from memory. The past selves you carry aren't just philosophical abstractions, they are literally encoded in the patterns of your neurons. When you recall a childhood moment, what you're experiencing is your present brain reactivating the circuits that were shaped by your past self. In that moment of recall, you are bridging across time, letting that earlier self whisper into your consciousness. But memory isn't perfect. In fact, memory is less like a video recording and more like a reconstruction. Every time you remember something, your brain doesn't play back a file. It rebuilds the memory, pulling bits and pieces from stored information, emotion, and imagination. This means the past self you think of when you remember isn't exactly how it was. It's a present-day version of that self, shaped by who you are now. And yet, the original moment still exists in space-time. You are experiencing a double layering, your present brain reconstructing the past, while physics holds the original version in its eternal place. This leads to an unsettling but fascinating truth. When you think about your past self, you are never remembering them as they really were. You are always colouring them with the brushstrokes of the present you. That means your past selves are both preserved and transformed. They are eternal in space-time, but mutable in memory. Neuroscience also shows us that the brain creates time not just through memory, but through perception. Your sense of now isn't instantaneous. When you experience a moment, your brain is actually buffering information. It takes about 2 to 3 seconds for your brain to assemble sensory data into what feels like a single present moment. That means the now you feel is already slightly in the past. You never live in the exact present. You live in a stitched-together construction of what just happened. In this way, your brain is constantly leaning on past selves to build the illusion of continuity. Some researchers call this the specious present. It's the idea that what you experience as now is actually a small window of time stitched together by your brain. This explains why you can hear a melody as music instead of as isolated notes. Your brain strings them together into a flowing pattern. Without this construction, you would hear each note separately, with no sense of rhythm. The same is true of your life. Without your brain weaving together slices of time, you would not feel like you are moving forward as one continuous self. This makes you wonder, who is the you that experiences time? Is it the current brain state locked into the present slice of space-time? Or is it the entire continuity of states, strung together by memory and perception, that gives rise to the illusion of a unified self? Neuroscience leans toward the latter. The self is not a single point. It is the ongoing story your brain tells, drawing from the archive of past selves and projecting into imagined futures. But this story is fragile. It can be disrupted. Studies of people under anesthesia, for example, show that when consciousness shuts off, the continuity of the self is interrupted. You don't feel time passing during unconsciousness. You simply wake up as though no time has moved. The you that was experiencing the world before anesthesia is gone, and the you that wakes up is not the same continuous awareness. It's a new instance of consciousness picking up the story. Yet your brain stitches it together anyway, convincing you that you were the same self all along. This is why neuroscientists sometimes describe consciousness as a narrative. It's a story being told by your brain, built from past experiences, present perceptions, and imagined futures. In this sense, your past selves are not just still here. They are the raw material for the narrative of who you believe yourself to be. Think of it like a library. Each past self is a book on the shelf, complete and unchanging. Your brain, in the present, is like the librarian, constantly pulling books down, summarizing them, editing them, and weaving them into the story it tells you about yourself. Some books get pulled often, like core childhood memories or defining life events. Others gather dust, rarely opened but still part of the collection. Yet all of them remain on the shelf, waiting. What's more, neuroscience has shown that even when you aren't actively recalling a memory, your past selves influence you unconsciously. Habits, emotional reactions, and even bodily responses are shaped by earlier versions of yourself. A person who learned to fear dogs as a child may still feel anxious around them decades later, even if they consciously know most dogs are safe. That early self left a permanent mark on the nervous system. In this way, the past self is alive, not in memory, but in the wiring of the brain and body. This perspective blurs the line between physics and psychology. Physics tells us the past self exists in space-time. Neuroscience tells us the past self exists in your brain structure. Together, they paint a picture of a person who is never just here. You are a walking archive carrying the weight and presence of every version of yourself that ever existed. It also raises deep questions about free will. If your brain is shaped by past experiences, then the choices you make today are influenced by selves who still live inside you. Are you truly making free decisions, or are you echoing the momentum of earlier versions? You might believe you're choosing something in the moment, but in many ways, you are the sum of accumulated past selves acting through you. Philosophers call this the bundle theory of the self, the idea that you are not one unified being, but a bundle of experiences and memories, each one adding to the whole. Neuroscience supports this. There is no single place in the brain that houses the self. Instead, it is distributed across many systems: memory networks, emotional centers, decision-making circuits. Your self is not one thing, but a collection, a tapestry woven from countless threads of earlier yous. This makes the statement, "Your past self is still here," not just poetic, but literal. Every cell, every memory, every behavior pattern is a trace of who you once were. And collectively, they form who you are now. Your consciousness is like the conductor of an orchestra made up of past selves, each one playing its notes in the symphony of the present. So next time you think about the person you were 5, 10, or 20 years ago, realize that they are not gone. They are still here, embedded in your brain's architecture, influencing your feelings and choices, shaping your identity. They exist not only in memory, but in the very structure of your consciousness. You are not a single self moving through time. You are a community of selves, each one preserved in the universe, each one active in your mind. Identity seems like such a stable thing. You wake up each morning and feel like the same person who went to bed last night. You look at pictures from childhood, and though you know you've grown, you recognize yourself in that small face. You can even think decades ahead and imagine who you might become. There's a thread that feels unbroken, a continuous eye that spans the years. But when you look closely, this sense of identity becomes slippery. How can you truly be the same person you were years ago, when almost everything about you has changed? Consider your body. The cells that make you are constantly dying and being replaced. Skin cells live for about 2 to 3 weeks. Red blood cells live for around 4 months. Even your bones, which feel permanent, are continuously remodeled by your body, and most of their material is replaced every decade or so. This means the physical you of 20 years ago is not the same as the physical you of today. Nearly every atom that once formed your body is gone. If identity were tied strictly to the matter that composes you, then you would be a completely different person many times over. Yet somehow you still feel continuous. This is the paradox: change without loss of identity. One way philosophers have tried to capture this is through the ship of Theseus thought experiment. Imagine an ancient ship preserved in a museum. Over time, its wooden planks decay and are replaced one by one with new planks. Eventually, every original piece of wood is gone. Is it still the same ship? If identity is about physical continuity, then no. It's a different ship made of new material. But if identity is about structure, form, or function, then yes, it's the same ship, because the overall pattern remains even though the parts have changed. You are like the ship of Theseus. The matter changes, but the pattern, the dynamic arrangement of cells, the neural connections in your brain, the continuity of memories, persists enough that you feel like the same person. But here's where the paradox deepens. That pattern itself is not stable. Your brain is not a static library of memories. It is constantly rewiring itself. The beliefs you held as a child are not the beliefs you hold now. The way you see the world, the people you love, the fears you carry, the knowledge you possess. All of these shift over time. If identity is about psychological continuity, then what happens when your psychology changes so much that you no longer resemble your earlier self? Think of a version of yourself from long ago, maybe when you were a child. That self didn't know what you know now. They didn't have the same experiences. They might not even understand the person you've become. Would they recognize you as them? In some ways, yes, but in other ways, maybe not. You may share a body and a name, but the gulf between your minds could be vast. So are you really the same person, or are you more like distant relatives who happen to share a timeline? Philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries. John Locke, the 17th century thinker, argued that identity is rooted in memory. For him, you are the same person if you can remember being that person. If you recall your childhood experiences, then you are continuous with your childhood self. But memory is fallible, and as we've seen, it's reconstructive. You can forget entire chapters of your life. Does that mean those selves are no longer you? What about memories that are distorted or false? Does that mean your identity is partly fictional? Locke's theory leads to strange puzzles. Suppose an old man remembers being a young soldier, and the soldier remembers being a child, but the old man no longer remembers the child. Is the old man still the child? Memory creates a chain of continuity, but it is not always complete. This raises the unsettling possibility that some versions of you drift beyond the reach of memory, becoming selves you are no longer connected to, even though they still exist in space-time. Another perspective comes from the philosopher Derek Parfit, who suggested that identity is not what really matters. What matters, he argued, is psychological connectedness, overlapping chains of memory, intention, and personality. If those chains are strong, then the you of yesterday and the you of today are deeply connected. If the chains weaken, then the sense of being the same person erodes. In this view, identity is not all or nothing. It's more like a spectrum. You are more or less the same person depending on how much continuity exists between versions of yourself. This idea challenges how we normally think about responsibility and morality. If the you of today is only loosely connected to the you of 10 years ago, should you be held accountable for their actions? Legally and socially, the answer is yes. You inherit their debts and their mistakes. But philosophically, the answer is murkier. Perhaps you are not fully the same person who made those choices, but are later being inheriting the consequences of their life. Identity becomes less like a solid line and more like a fading trail. The paradox sharpens when you consider radical psychological change. Imagine someone who undergoes a traumatic brain injury or develops dementia. Their personality shifts, their memories vanish. They no longer act like the person their family once knew. In a deep sense, they are no longer the same self, even though their body continues. This forces us to confront the uncomfortable fact that the self is not a fixed entity, but a fragile construction. When the pattern breaks, the identity dissolves, even though the physical organism remains. Yet at the same time, identity also has resilience. Even with change, people can feel deeply tied to who they once were. Someone who has reinvented their life, moved to a new place, or abandoned an old worldview can still look back and say, "That was me, even if I'm different now." This suggests that identity isn't about exact sameness, but about ownership. You claim your past selves as yours, regardless of how much distance lies between them. The paradox is that you can both feel like the same person and recognize that you've become someone new. Physics complicates this further. If every past self still exists in space-time, then there is a literal version of you frozen at each stage, unchanged, preserved forever. In that sense, identity is fragmented. There isn't one you stretching across time, but many yous, each fixed in their own moment. You are not one person, but a collection of selves, like frames in a film reel. The continuity you feel is your consciousness moving frame by frame, stitching them into a story. But in reality, all the frames exist equally. This leads to the mind-bending possibility that there is no single you at all. Instead, there are countless versions of you, each equally real, each existing eternally. The you reading this sentence is not the same as the you who began this paragraph. They are related like siblings, but they are not identical. Identity becomes less like a line and more like a constellation, a cluster of points linked by patterns of memory and perception. And yet, in daily life, you cannot escape the feeling of unity. You need identity to function. You need to believe that you are the same self who makes choices, learns lessons, and carries memories. Without that unity, life would fracture into chaos. Perhaps this is why your brain works so hard to smooth the cracks, to weave change into continuity, to tell a story that makes sense. The paradox of identity may never be resolved logically, but it is resolved practically by the mind's determination to hold itself together. The real question becomes, which version of identity do you accept? The physical continuity, even though your matter changes. The psychological continuity, even though memories fade and beliefs shift. The space-time continuity, where every self exists eternally but separately. Or perhaps none of these capture the whole truth. Perhaps identity is not a thing at all, but an illusion, a useful fiction that makes survival possible. If that's true, then your past selves are not just still here. They are you in every way that matters, yet also not you in ways that challenge your deepest intuitions. They are both continuous with you and separate from you, both gone and eternal. The paradox of identity is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to live with. It reminds you that being a person is not about being a fixed thing, but about being a process, a river flowing through time, never the same in any instant, yet somehow always itself. When you think of your future, you probably imagine it as a realm of possibilities. You don't know exactly where you'll live, who you'll be with, what choices you'll make, or what events will shape your life. The future feels open, unformed, like an empty page waiting to be written. But if space-time is a four-dimensional block, as physics suggests, then the future is not open at all. It is already there, laid out just as fully as the past. Every future version of you already exists, waiting in its place in the timeline, as real as the version of you reading these words right now. This is a radical idea. We're used to thinking that time flows, carrying us from past to future, and that the future doesn't yet exist until it arrives. But in the block universe view, time doesn't flow. It simply is. The past, present, and future are all equally real slices of space-time. That means the you of tomorrow is not a mere possibility. They are already there, fixed in their place. The you of 10 years from now, whether thriving or struggling, joyful or sorrowful, already exists as well. Every heartbeat, every decision, every experience you will ever have is etched into space-time. This can be both comforting and unsettling. On one hand, it suggests that you are never really gone. Even your future self, long after your current moment passes, still exists eternally in its place in the block. On the other hand, it raises troubling questions about free will. If the future already exists, then how can you change it? Aren't your choices already written into the fabric of space-time, like lines of a script you can't alter? This question has haunted philosophers and scientists for centuries. If the future is fixed, then perhaps free will is an illusion. You feel like you are choosing, but in reality, you are simply enacting what was always destined to occur. Every decision you make, every fork in the road, is already there in the block. You don't create your future, you discover it moment by moment, like a traveller moving through a landscape that was always there. But there are other ways to think about it. Some physicists and philosophers argue that the block universe doesn't mean you lack agency. Instead, it reframes what free will means. Your choices are real, but they exist as part of the block itself. In other words, the future includes your decisions. The you who chooses already exists in space-time, and their choice is part of the structure of the universe. You are not outside the block, altering it. You are inside it, one of the events that make it what it is. Think of it like reading a novel. The ending of the story is already written, but when you're on chapter 5, you don't know what's coming next. As a reader, you experience suspense, surprise, and the sense of unfolding possibilities. From outside the novel, the story is fixed. From inside, it feels alive. Life may be like this. The block universe holds the entire story of you, beginning to end. But from your vantage point within the story, you only see one page at a time, and so it feels like you are actively creating the plot. This raises an even stranger thought. If your future selves already exist, are they, in some sense, conscious right now? Just as your past selves are preserved in space-time, frozen but eternally real, your future selves are also there. That means the version of you 5 minutes from now is just as real as the version of you this second. The version of you decades ahead, older with more experiences and perhaps wiser, is also there. All of these selves coexist in space-time, like beads threaded on a string. You only ever experience one bead at a time, but the whole string is already complete. If that's true, then in a way, your future self is waiting for you. The you of tomorrow, with their worries, their joys, their particular state of mind, already exists. But you cannot reach them until your consciousness advances along the thread. It is like watching light from a star. The light has already travelled across space, but it only reaches your eyes in this moment. Your future exists, but you can only see it when your awareness arrives there. This way of thinking brings comfort to some people. If the future is already written, then nothing can truly go wrong. Your life unfolds exactly as it is supposed to. Even the mistakes and tragedies are not deviations, but necessary parts of the tapestry. Others, though, find this view suffocating. If everything is predetermined, what is the point of striving, of choosing, of imagining? If your future is fixed, then are you just an actor following lines you can't rewrite? Yet there's another possibility. Some physicists propose that the block is not rigid, but flexible. In quantum mechanics, events are not strictly determined until they happen. Particles exist in superpositions of possibilities, and only when observed do they collapse into a definite state. Some argue that the same might apply to time itself, that the block contains a branching structure of possible futures, and which path becomes real depends on the choices you make. In this view, your future selves are not singular, but multiple. Every possible version of you exists in a branching tree of timelines. The version of you who takes one path is as real as the version of you who takes another, each inhabiting their own world. This raises mind-bending questions about identity. If there are countless future selves branching from this moment, are they all you? Or are they separate beings? cousins split from the same origin. Perhaps identity stretches across them all, or perhaps it fractures, with each branch becoming its own distinct story. If so, then the self you think of as you is not a single thread, but a vast web of futures. You are a network of selves, not just one. Even if you set aside branching universes, the paradox of the future self remains. Suppose your future is fixed. That doesn't stop you from caring about it. You still plan, hope, worry, and strive. In fact, those emotions are themselves part of the block. Your anxiety about the future, your dreams for tomorrow, your regrets about yesterday, they are as real as the events themselves. The way you relate to your future self shapes your life, even if the outcome is already there. This is why people often talk about their future self as if it were another person. You save money so your future self can live comfortably. You exercise so your future self can be healthy. You procrastinate, knowing your future self will deal with the consequences. It's almost like a relationship, except the other person is you, stretched across time. And if physics is right, that person already exists, watching and waiting for the moment when your awareness finally arrives in their skin. The thought becomes more profound when you realize that every stage of your life is equally real in the block. The child you once were still exists. The adult you are now exists. The older person you will become already exists. Together, they form the full portrait of your life. You are not a single being moving through time. You are all of these beings coexisting eternally in space-time, each fixed in their own place, each part of the greater whole. From this perspective, life is not about becoming, but about being. You don't turn into your future self. You already are them in another region of the block. Your story is complete, even if you cannot see it all at once. The mystery lies not in whether the future exists, but in why you experience time as unfolding. Why do you move from one frame to the next, never able to jump ahead or linger behind? Why does consciousness flow when space-time itself does not? That is the great enigma. The block universe tells us that the future is already real, but it cannot tell us why we only ever feel the present. Perhaps time is not something we move through, but something consciousness creates. Perhaps the illusion of flowing time is the only way a being like us can experience existence. To know the entire block at once would be to step outside of time entirely, to see all past and future selves in a single glance. But as humans, we are bound to the present, walking step by step through a universe that has already been laid out. The paradox of the future self is that it is both unknowable and inevitable. You cannot reach them yet, but they are already there. You cannot change them, yet they are shaped by the choices you are making now. They are you, and yet they are someone you have not yet met. To think of your future this way is to realize that you are not just becoming who you will be. You already are them, waiting in another corner of space-time, just as real as you are now. When we talk about the idea that your past self is still here, we usually default to memory as the main evidence. Memory is the brain's ability to store information and reconstruct past events. But the deeper question is whether those past events still exist, independent of your recollection. Imagine walking through your life as though it were a book. The chapter you're currently in feels most real, but the earlier chapters haven't been erased. They're still part of the book, written and waiting. Time may operate in the same way. What you call your past self is not a discarded draft, but a written page in the timeline of your life. The pages don't vanish just because you've turned them. They remain part of the story, and their words still shape the unfolding chapters ahead. Physics provides one way to think about this. In Einstein's block universe model, the past, present, and future are all laid out in a four-dimensional structure. If this is the case, the younger version of you, the one from 5, 10, or 20 years ago, still exists in that structure. You are simply experiencing one slice of it right now. To visualize this, imagine a film reel. Each frame captures a moment. While you only see one frame projected at a time, all the other frames are still there. They do not disappear when the movie advances. Your past self is still etched into those frames of the cosmic reel. What we call consciousness might simply be our mind's way of traveling across those frames, locked into a particular vantage point. But this model raises a challenging question. If the past is still there, does that mean the person you used to be is still alive in some sense? The teenager worrying about trivial things, the child making discoveries, the version of you who once felt heartbreak for the first time. Are they ongoing, somewhere in time? This isn't only a physical speculation, but also a philosophical one. It forces us to reconsider what identity really is. Are you only the present experience, or are you a continuous thread stretching across all those moments? Perhaps what you call you is not a single self, but an accumulation of selves layered in time, none of which have truly vanished. There's a fascinating paradox here. From one perspective, you are not the same person as your younger self. Your cells have turned over, your thoughts have changed, your beliefs may have shifted dramatically. Neuroscience tells us that the brain is in constant flux, reshaping itself through neuroplasticity. Memories fade, connections are pruned, new associations are formed. Yet from another perspective, the continuity of your consciousness makes you feel like the same being who experienced childhood and adolescence. The sense of self is a kind of glue that binds all those changing versions together. But if time itself is a structure rather than a river, then maybe both things are true. You are the same being across time, but each of those versions still exist independently within the fabric of reality. Consider the role of memory again, but from a different angle. You might believe that remembering something brings the past into the present, as though the memory is a ghostly echo. But what if memory is more like tuning into a frequency that is always broadcasting? The past self exists in its own place in space-time, and memory is the mechanism that allows your brain to connect back to that coordinate. In this way, memory isn't just an internal archive, it's a bridge across time. Neuroscientists usually explain memory in terms of patterns of neurons refiring, but some researchers have suggested that time and memory may be more deeply linked than we realize. The hippocampus, which is critical for forming memories, is also deeply involved in imagining the future. The same machinery that allows you to recall your past also allows you to project yourself forward. This suggests that the brain treats time not as a fleeting flow, but as a landscape it can navigate. If the past is still there, one of the most striking implications is that your past selves may be influencing you more than you notice. Every decision you make, every instinct you feel, has roots in the experiences of those earlier versions of you. But beyond psychology, there may be a more literal influence. Some physicists studying retrocausality, events where the future can affect the past, propose that time may not be a one-way street. While these ideas remain controversial, they open the door to the possibility that your present self interacts with your past self in subtle ways. Instead of thinking of past and present as disconnected, we might imagine them as interwoven threads constantly tugging on one another. This reshapes how we might view identity. Suppose you reflect on something you regret from years ago. You might feel powerless since you believe that person is gone and the action cannot be undone. But if the past self is still there, frozen in time, then that version of you hasn't disappeared. They are still living out that moment in the vast architecture of space-time. While you cannot change their experience, acknowledging their ongoing presence might bring a different kind of acceptance. You're not looking back at a shadow, you're looking sideways at a still present dimension of yourself. This perspective can shift regret into compassion. Instead of disowning that person as not me anymore, you might begin to treat them as a companion still on the path, a younger traveller whose footsteps laid the road you now walk. There's also a poetic implication for consciousness itself. If consciousness is tied to time, then perhaps it's not strictly linear. Imagine consciousness as a light shining across the timeline. Most of the time, it illuminates the present frame, but sometimes it flickers toward the past or leaps toward the imagined future. Dreams, déjà vu, sudden flashbacks. These may be moments when the beam of awareness briefly shifts away from the immediate present, reminding you that the mind is not trapped in only one instant. The enduring presence of your past selves may occasionally break through in such moments, hinting that your life is more like a gallery of simultaneous portraits than a single moving image. Philosophers have long wrestled with this. Some argue for eternalism, the idea that all points in time are equally real. In this view, your past self is as real as your present self, even if you no longer directly experience being them. Others lean toward presentism, believing only the present exists, but science increasingly aligns with eternalism, especially through relativity. If two observers moving differently can disagree about what is now, then now may not be absolute. Your past self may be someone else's present. Somewhere in the cosmos, under certain conditions, the light from your childhood is still streaming outward, showing the younger you to distant stars. This is not metaphorical, it's literal. The photons that reflected off your face years ago are still traveling, carrying an image of your younger self through space. If someone could intercept them with a powerful enough telescope, they could see you as you once were. In this way, your past self is undeniably still here, written into the very fabric of the universe. Reflecting on this forces us to reconsider what it means to grow, to change, to move forward. Growth may not erase your past selves. It may simply add new layers. Like geological strata, each version of you is preserved. The child, the adolescent, the adult, they remain as fossils of consciousness embedded in time. And just as geologists can study ancient layers of the earth to understand the present, you can study your inner layers to understand who you are now. Instead of thinking of your past as gone, perhaps it is more accurate to see it as an ongoing archive, one that never ceases to exist, even as new experiences are added on top. The real mystery is whether consciousness itself moves beyond the present. If time is all laid out, could awareness shift to revisit past moments or jump forward? Some speculative theories of physics suggest this could be possible, though we lack the tools to test it. For now, your awareness seems confined to the present, but the fact that the past remains may mean that your consciousness is only one perspective among many. You are not the entirety of yourself. You are the lens through which one moment is being experienced. All your past selves are still lenses too, gazing out at their moments. Together, they form the mosaic that is you. If your past selves are still here, preserved in the structure of time, then the next question is whether you can ever actually connect with them. On the surface, it sounds impossible. The rules of everyday experience insist that the past is behind you, unreachable and sealed. But every so often, you feel moments that seem to contradict this. Glimpses where the ordinary flow of time feels less stable, as though cracks open in the wall separating present from past. These experiences might be hints that your consciousness is not fully confined to a single moment. Consider déjà vu. Almost everyone has experienced it at some point. The uncanny sense that you have lived through this moment before, that the present feels like a repetition of something already experienced. Neuroscience usually explains this as a misfiring of memory, your brain accidentally treating a current perception as if it were already stored. But the eeriness of déjà vu runs deeper than a simple error. It feels like a collision between timelines, like a signal leaking in from another version of yourself who has already lived this scene. If all times exist in the block universe, then déjà vu might be less about faulty memory and more about your awareness brushing up against the fact that your life is already laid out. Dreams provide another avenue. In dreams, the strict rules of time bend and dissolve. You can be a child again, reliving moments long gone, yet your dream self feels just as real as your waking self. Sometimes you even dream about people you once knew, conversations you once had, or places you once lived, and the dream resurrects them in vivid detail. Neuroscience says dreams are the brain reorganizing memories, but one could also imagine that dreams are temporary windows into your other selves. When you dream of being younger, maybe your mind is not just imagining, it is tuning into the version of you still living in that moment, much like switching channels on a cosmic television. Some altered states of consciousness amplify this idea. People who meditate deeply or those who experiment with psychedelics often report a loosening of time. They describe feeling as though they are simultaneously many versions of themselves, or that they can step outside the ordinary flow and observe their life from a higher vantage point. In such states, time no longer feels like a linear road, but a vast field spread out before them. These reports, while subjective, suggest that the sense of now is not as rigid as we assume. If consciousness can shift perspective, then perhaps those past selves are not as distant as they appear. This perspective challenges the way we define memory itself. What if memory is not merely stored data in the brain, but an active connection to a real past? When you recall being 6 years old, you are not simply replaying a recording, you are reaching across time, brushing against the younger self who still exists in that moment. The reason the memory feels incomplete is not because it has degraded, but because your perspective is limited. You are peeking through a small window into a version of yourself that is still living its moment, unaware that a future self is watching. If this sounds strange, consider that in physics, time is already treated as a dimension much like space. Just as you can look across a room, but cannot fully occupy another person's viewpoint, you might be able to see your past self faintly without being able to step back into their shoes. It's worth exploring why these glimpses matter. If your past self is truly still here, then perhaps part of the mind's role is to keep you tethered to that ongoing presence. Regret, nostalgia, longing. These emotions may not just be psychological quirks. They might be the echoes of active connections between your present self and those earlier selves. When you long for a childhood moment, it may be because that moment is still happening, and a thread of your consciousness is still tied to it. This would explain why nostalgia feels so much more real than imagination. It's not just a fabrication, but a resonance with another slice of time that still exists. Take a moment to imagine it vividly. The younger version of you existing in their world, moving through their day, unaware of what will come next. They feel just as real to themselves as you do now. In the block universe, that person is still alive in their chapter, frozen yet ongoing, while you continue forward. Your awareness may not be able to fully return, but the connection remains. Perhaps déjà vu, dreams, and sudden waves of memory are the universe's way of reminding you that you are not only the person you are now, you are also the sum of all those ongoing selves scattered across time. This brings us to a deeper question. If all your past selves exist, does that mean your future self is equally real? If déjà vu feels like a ripple from the past brushing against the present, might premonitions or strange intuitions be ripples from the future? After all, if time is a structure, then your future self is already there, just as your past self is still here. This doesn't mean you can access it at will, but it suggests that consciousness may not be strictly confined to one point in the timeline. Just as radio waves exist all around you, but you only pick up one station at a time, your awareness may usually be tuned to the present, but occasionally catch interference from other moments. For centuries, humans have told stories of visions, prophetic dreams, or uncanny foresight. While skeptics dismiss these as coincidence or imagination, it's possible that they are glimpses of a reality where time is not locked into a one-way arrow. If the mind can sometimes stretch backward to touch the past self, why couldn't it occasionally stretch forward to glimpse the future self? Both are equally real within the fabric of space-time. At this point, you might wonder, if my past self is still here, do they know about me? Does the child I once was have any awareness of my existence? From their perspective, no. They are still living as themselves, unaware of what lies ahead. But from your perspective, you hold them within you. You are the evidence of their existence, the living continuation of their choices and experiences. You are their future self, just as someone else is your future self waiting further along the line. This one-way awareness creates the illusion that only the present is real, but in truth, the timeline holds all of you at once. What this means is that the boundaries between selves are less solid than we think. The person you were 5 years ago is not gone. They are still there, etched into space-time. The child you once were is not gone. They are still there too. Your mind, in moments of dreaming or déjà vu, may be able to feel them faintly, as though across a thin wall. And if that is true, then perhaps the you that exists now is also not the final word. You are only one moment in the gallery of selves that make up your life. The thread of your consciousness is stretched across all of them, making each one real, connected, and alive. If all your past selves are still here, preserved in time, then the question is no longer just a matter of physics or philosophy. It becomes personal. What does this truth actually mean for the way you live? For the way you see yourself? For the way you think about meaning, regret, and choice? It's one thing to imagine your childhood self still playing in their room, but it's another to recognize that every decision you've ever made still exists in the fabric of reality, and so do the people you once were. Most of us live as if the past is gone forever. We regret mistakes because we believe we can never return. We long for happy moments because we think they are lost. But in the block universe, those moments are not lost at all. They are still there, as real as your present moment. That should change the way you relate to memory and time. It means that regret is not about erasing what happened. It's about learning how to live with the fact that your past self is still there eternally. When you remember something painful, you're not just replaying an event, you're touching a living part of the timeline that still exists. That self is still enduring that moment. This idea may sound unsettling at first. If your younger self is still there, struggling through heartbreak or confusion, does that mean they are trapped forever in suffering? In one sense, yes, they remain frozen in their chapter, unable to escape. But in another sense, you exist now as their proof of survival. You are the continuation of them, the living evidence that they made it through. When you think of your past self in pain, you can also recognize that their story didn't end there. It led to you. You are their future, and in that way, you are also their redemption. This reframes the way we think about healing. Healing is not just about moving on. It's about building a future that retroactively changes the meaning of the past. The child who once felt powerless is still there, but by becoming stronger now, you give that child a kind of retroactive comfort. The teenager who once felt lost is still there, but by finding direction now, you give that teenager a kind of closure. You cannot change their moment, but you can change what their moment leads to. And since all times exist at once, this connection is not just symbolic, it's structural. The meaning of your past selves is still unfolding through the choices you make now. This perspective also transforms nostalgia. When you look back at a joyful memory, you often wish you could go back, as though that happiness is gone. But what if it's not gone? What if the laughter, the friendships, the golden afternoons of your childhood are still there, real and vivid, playing out in their slice of time? Then nostalgia is not a craving for something lost. It's a faint awareness of something still alive. Your longing is not proof of absence, but proof of presence. You are sensing that the joy you once felt is still radiating through the structure of time. Living with this knowledge can shift how you experience the present. If every moment is eternal, then the present is not just a fleeting second. It's an addition to the gallery of selves that will always exist. The way you live now is not only temporary, it is permanent. You are not just passing through this moment, you are inscribing it into the architecture of reality, where it will endure alongside all your other selves. That makes each choice heavier, but also more meaningful. Every word you say, every action you take, every kindness or cruelty is not simply something that passes away. It is something that becomes part of the permanent record of who you are. This is both comforting and daunting. It means your moments of love, connection, and joy will always exist. It also means your mistakes, your failures, and your cruelties will always exist too. But instead of being a burden, this can be a call to live more intentionally. If every version of you is preserved, then the only real freedom you have is how you continue to shape the timeline from where you are now. You cannot erase what has happened, but you can choose what comes next. And that choice ripples backward as well as forward, changing the significance of everything that came before. There's also something profoundly humbling in this idea. We tend to think of ourselves as a single identity, moving forward through life. But in truth, you are many identities, each one frozen in their moment. The you who first learned to walk, the you who first fell in love, the you who faced your greatest heartbreak. They are all still here, just as real as you are now. Your sense of continuity is not because the past disappeared, but because you are the thread stitching all these selves together. You are not just one person, you are a constellation of selves, spread out across the dimension of time. This constellation perspective invites empathy for yourself. It's easy to look back with shame or self-criticism, judging who you once were for not knowing better. But if that self still exists, then maybe they deserve compassion instead. They were not a stage you outgrew. They are a person still living in their moment, still vulnerable, still real. When you feel self-forgiveness, perhaps what you're really doing is extending kindness across time to another version of yourself who still needs it. In that way, forgiveness is not abstract. It is an act of care for someone who is still alive within the timeline. The same logic extends to others. If your past self still exists, then so do the past selves of everyone you've ever known. The friend you lost touch with, the person who hurt you, the loved one who passed away, they are all still living their chapters. That means connection is not as fragile as it seems. Relationships may change, people may drift apart, lives may end, but the moments you shared are not gone. They remain in time, eternal. Somewhere, you and your best friend are still laughing together as teenagers. Somewhere, you and your first love are still walking hand in hand. Somewhere, you and someone you miss deeply are still together. This knowledge can soften the sting of loss. Nothing that happened is ever erased. It is all still there, existing as vividly as the moment you lived it. Now let's take this even further. If your past selves are still here, and if your choices shape not just the future, but the meaning of the past, then life itself becomes a dialogue across time. Every moment is both a response to what came before and a message to what comes after. You are in conversation with your past selves, who gave you the foundation you stand on, and with your future selves, who will carry the consequences of your actions. You are not isolated in the present. You are part of a living continuum, constantly in exchange with versions of yourself spread across time. This dialogue raises an extraordinary possibility. Maybe consciousness itself is not bound to one point in time, but stretches across them all. Maybe what you call you is not just the person listening right now, but the entire network of selves that make up your timeline. If that is true, then you are larger than you think. You are not just a momentary observer, you are the entire arc of your life, past, present, and future, existing together. And the awareness you feel now is just one small window into that greater whole. Living with this perspective means realizing that your life is not something you move through. It is something you are woven into. Every choice you make matters, not because it will vanish, but because it will endure. Every joy you feel matters, not because it is fleeting, but because it is permanent. And every pain you survive matters, not because it will end, but because it becomes part of a larger story that leads to strength, growth, and meaning. When you look at your life this way, the question shifts. It is no longer, what have I lost? But, what will I add to the eternal record of who I am? The past is not gone, the future is not yet here, but both are equally real. All that matters is what you choose to create in the present, knowing that this creation will always remain. If every version of you still exists, each moment alive, each chapter intact, then maybe the greatest illusion is not that time flows, but that you are a single person. Perhaps what you call you is not an isolated individual walking through life, but a vast network of selves existing all at once across the structure of time. What you experience as the present might only be one narrow slice of your true identity. Think about it. You do not remember your earliest days, yet they are still part of you. You cannot feel the future you will become, yet they are already real in the timeline. You sense continuity because memory ties some moments together, but memory is selective. It gives you the impression of a single me, when in reality the truth may be stranger. You are not one observer moving through time, but all your observers simultaneously. Each moment of consciousness is like a candle lit within its own room, unaware that thousands of other rooms are also glowing, side by side, forming one enormous house of being. If that's true, then identity is not something you carry. It's something you are embedded in. The you who is 5 years old, the you who is 20, the you who is 70, they are all you, just as much as the one listening right now. They are not stages that come and go. They are facets of the same being, shining eternally. You are not the traveller through time. You are the collection of all travellers. This is difficult to grasp because your awareness seems locked to one moment. You wake up here, not in childhood, not in the future, but in the now. Yet that might only be a limitation of perception. Imagine watching a movie frame by frame. If you could only ever see one frame at a time, you might believe that the story exists only in the present image. But the reel contains every frame at once. The film already exists from beginning to end. The story doesn't vanish when you move forward. It is always there, complete. Consciousness may be the same way. You are locked to one frame, but your true identity is the entire reel. This perspective reshapes questions of purpose. If you are all yourselves, then what does it mean to live a good life? It might mean recognizing that no single moment defines you. Your mistakes are part of you, but so are your triumphs. Your fears are part of you, but so are your acts of courage. Your identity is not determined by one snapshot. It is the totality of every version of you existing together. To reduce yourself to one moment, good or bad, is like reducing a novel to one sentence. The meaning of your life can only be seen in the whole. It also reshapes the idea of death. From the perspective of the block universe, your death is simply another moment in time, no more or less real than your birth, your first kiss, or this very second. Just as your past selves still exist, your final moment also exists. But here's the twist. If all moments are equally real, then your death does not erase your earlier selves. They remain. Your childhood still exists. Your laughter still exists. Your middle years still exist. Death is not the end of you. It is only one chapter among many, permanently woven into the structure of time. The larger you, the constellation of selves, cannot be erased because every piece of you exists forever. This brings us to a radical thought. Maybe consciousness is not bound to one single point, but distributed across them all. What you feel right now is just the awareness of this version, but other versions of you are also aware in their moments. The child is aware, the teenager is aware, the future self is aware. All of them feel alive because they are alive in their chapters. From their perspective, they are the present, which means that your life is not one stream of awareness, but a chorus of awarenesses, each one singing from its own place in time. You do not move through them, they all exist at once, equally vivid. If this is true, then you are not a single line of identity, but something more like a field of consciousness, spread across time the way a landscape is spread across space. You can only see one patch at a time, but the whole terrain is you. When you die, the awareness in this patch fades, but the rest of the terrain still exists. Other parts of you, your earlier selves, are still alive and conscious in their moments. In fact, if all times exist, then there was never a first self or a last self. There was only the whole eternally. This is almost impossible to truly picture, because we are so conditioned to think linearly. But imagine stepping outside of time and looking at your life as an object. You would see not a moving person, but a stretched shape. A being that begins in infancy and extends into old age, existing all at once. From outside of time, that shape is you. From inside, you experience only one cross-section at a time. Both are true, but the larger truth is that you are not the cross-section. You are the shape. This view of self can be liberating. It means you are not trapped by one moment, one mistake, or one fear. Your identity is not fragile. It cannot be undone by a single failure, because your other selves remain. You are vast, and every part of you is equally real. To know yourself fully, you would have to embrace all your moments, not just the one you're in. That is perhaps the greatest challenge, to see yourself not as a fleeting figure, but as a timeless presence, woven through the entire fabric of your life. But there's an even deeper implication. If identity is distributed across time, then maybe consciousness itself is not just yours. Maybe the same principle applies universally. Every being, every moment, Every consciousness is a piece of a greater whole, all existing at once. What you call you may just be one localized node in a larger field of awareness that encompasses everything. The line between self and universe may not be as sharp as it seems. You may be more connected to the totality of existence than you realize, because your very sense of self is already spread across a structure larger than you can perceive. This blurs the line between personal and cosmic. If your past selves exist eternally, and if your awareness is part of a larger field, then perhaps identity is not an individual spark, but part of an eternal fire. You are not merely living through time, you are a fragment of time itself, conscious of itself for a moment. Your awareness may be the universe peering through one window, just as surely as it peers through billions of others. That means the truth about your past self still being here is not just about memory or regret. It is about the nature of reality itself. You are not moving through time. You are time, taking the shape of a human life. And all your versions, from beginning to end, are just different expressions of that same truth. All along, we've been unraveling a single idea, that your past self is not gone. That the person you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or even 20 is still here, suspended in time, alive in their own chapter of existence. And if that's true, then your identity is not a fleeting flame flickering from moment to moment, but a constellation of selves, permanent and unbroken. Every smile you've ever had, every fear you've ever felt, every time you've wondered who you are, each of those moments remains. They are not erased, not swallowed by time, but still existing within the vast structure of reality. The past does not vanish. It is preserved, like light traveling endlessly through space. And that means that you, in some sense, are preserved too. You are not just one self, you are all of yourselves. The child, the teenager, the adult, the elder. Each one is as real as the one listening right now. What you call the present is simply the moment where your awareness is currently placed. But that awareness does not define the whole of you. You are bigger than that, spread out across the corridors of time. And perhaps that's the quiet lesson hidden in all of this. You worry so much about who you are becoming, or what you have left behind, but both are still here. The past you is alive in their world. The future you is already real in theirs. And you, here in the middle, are part of the same unbroken being. There is no loss. There is only presence, eternal and layered. If this is the truth about time, then maybe you don't need to fear change, because the version of you that exists right now will always exist. This moment will never disappear. Your laughter tonight, your thoughts tonight, your awareness tonight, they are etched permanently into the fabric of the universe. Long after you move forward, this self will remain, just as the child you once were remains. And that permanence means you are already eternal. You don't have to try to hold on. You already are held. So let your mind rest in that. The anxiety of the future, the regrets of the past. These are only heavy when you believe that time takes things away. But nothing is ever taken. Everything you are is still here. Everything you were is still alive. And everything you will be is already unfolding. You can let go of the fear of being lost, because you cannot be lost. You exist in every direction, in every moment, in every version of yourself. And now, as you drift into sleep, allow yourself to feel this truth not as a concept, but as a presence. Close your eyes and imagine yourself not as a single person, but as a vast tapestry of moments. Each breath you've ever taken, each thought you've ever had, each dream you've ever lived. They are all threads in this endless fabric. You're woven through time, and time is woven through you. Notice how peaceful it is to know that you cannot be undone, that your existence is not a fragile line, but a solid structure already complete. Tonight, you can rest in that completeness. You don't need to solve it. You don't need to hold on. You only need to be here and now in this moment of awareness, knowing that all of you, past and future, are safe within the fabric of time. Let that realization become soft and comforting. Let your body loosen, your thoughts slow, your breath steady. You are part of something eternal, and tonight you are allowed to rest in it. The past you is safe. The future you is safe. The present you is safe. So drift now gently into the rhythm of sleep. Feel the layers of self surrounding you like a quiet, endless presence. You are not alone because every version of you is here, always. You are not temporary because nothing is lost. And as you close your eyes, you can let go, knowing that you are, and always will be, part of the eternal truth of time. Good night.